Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tandem Theory Webinar. Just a few housekeeping things. If you have any questions during our webinar, feel free to post them in the chat on the right of your screen. We'll begin now. Thanks again for joining our Tandem Theory Webinar. Today we'll be talking about retaining visibility into your customer behavior. More importantly, talking about July's Google Analytics change. My name is David Colson. I'm the SVP of Digital here at Tandem Theory. With me today to talk about this topic are three of our esteemed panelists or theorists. First is Trey Williams, our Director of Analytics Architecture.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, David. As you mentioned, my name is Trey Williams. I'm the Director of Analytics Architecture here at Tandem Theory. I've been in this space for a little over a decade now, really focusing on the marketing and web analytics component, and really excited to be here to discuss with you some of the changes that are coming around the corner with this Google Analytics update.
Awesome. Thank you, Trey. Also with us today is Tracy Gamlin, who is our Director of Digital Analytics.
Hi, Tracy Gamlin. Passionate about all things digital marketing, digital measurement. I've been in this field for about 10 to 15 years now, longer than I care to admit, but really excited about the changes upcoming here and thankful to be here to talk about them today.
Awesome, thank you. And then finally, we have Kim Town, who is our Manager of Marketing Science.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Town. I have been working with web analytics since the dawn of time, or at least since the beginning of Google Analytics way back in the Urchin days. And I am very passionate about website tracking.
Awesome, thank you. So today what we're going to talk about, what to expect, is with the impending sunset of Universal Analytics. As you know it and as you've been using it, how should brands and agencies prepare for the upcoming change to Google Analytics 4, or GA4 as we'll refer to it? A big quote here, but honestly, to give some background, 2.5 years ago, GA4 was introduced to address evolving measurement standards and really help businesses succeed in the right way. GA4 brings the flexibility to measure many different types of data. It allows for businesses to look at unified user journey across website and apps, and also applies some really great features like machine learning and technology to surface and predict new insights. So really taking all of these products and bringing them together to provide a more cohesive offering against a changing ecosystem. So with Google Analytics 4, because a lot of people are just starting to hear about it, starting to understand it, it's really about the when, the why, the what. So I know that everyone has questions, and we've definitely got some answers to share with you. To begin, if you can't stay for the whole time, too long, don't read. Here are 5 quick facts to take away. Universal Analytics is going to sunset in July 2023. This is not an update. It's a brand new way of analysis. Your old or current data in UA will become incompatible, and we'll talk to you a little bit about what that means and how to preserve that data. And then really data privacy is at its core. So when we talk about data privacy policies and procedures, this has all been baked in and built around within GA4. But in order to make this migration and to make it soon, you do need to get a plan together and to work with your team. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here. Kim, tell us a little bit about the timeline of where we got to for GA4 and where all of this began for us.
Sure, David. It began way back in 2005 with Urchin Analytics, which became the first version of Google Analytics. Around 2007, they updated it to Classic Analytics, and Urchin still worked. They just added some functionality with Classic. Then in 2012, they moved to a newer version called Universal Analytics. And then, around 2014, they added a different type of analytics, Firebase, and that was for app tracking. And then 2016, they changed their recommendations of how to install it by introducing Tag Manager. So instead of placing the GA code on the site, we put it in through Tag Manager. After that, in 2017, they rolled out the global site tag. And this was an upgrade that played nicely with Google Ads and Google Marketing Platform. And then in 2020, they introduced GA App Plus Web, which is GA4 as we know today. There have been a lot of enhancements around the way. In July of 2023, Universal Analytics will go away and everything will be GA4.
Got it. Thank you for the background on that. And when we talk about this, again, this isn't an upgrade. This is a new way of analysis. This is a new version of Google Analytics with a lot of other new features in it. So talk to me about, what do we mean when we say a new way of analysis?
Yeah, what that really means at the core is that this is a new framework, for Google Analytics in particular. It's more user-centric, which we'll dive into a little bit later in here, but really focusing, on the user first, less so on the property that they're visiting. And I think one of the biggest components here is the privacy component. So that's at the core as well. And then GA4 is a pretty big integration with Google, with BigQuery, right? So that's that private data foundation. And I know Trey has a lot to say around that as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Tracy. Historically, or at least under Universal Analytics, there was a pretty hefty fee associated with that integration of your raw data into the BigQuery environment. Now, just as a refresher, BigQuery, when we talk about BigQuery, it's just a cloud-hosted relational database that exists natively within Google's environment. And so that's how, as we transition to GA4, they're going to be offering this free integration. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later. But, BigQuery is certainly going to be a significant component of the opportunity that GA4 presents.
Awesome. And a big fear factor in this, right, is that, my old UA data, all of this data I've built up over the last, 15 plus years will become incompatible, meaning that it won't be an apples to apples comparison to what I will now have in GA4, which again is a very scary thought. So talk to me a little bit about, what happens with that old data, and what are some of the watch outs? What's going to be missing?
There are definitely a lot of changes in GA4. And when you talk about the numbers won't match, it's because in GA4, there's improved ways of counting users. There's different ways of counting sessions. So Universal Analytics was very limited, especially on mobile devices. If you lost connection or came back to the site, Universal didn't catch that second visit. I had it open, I went somewhere else, I came back. Universal had no way of capturing that new session or that new view because there wasn't a page view with it. In GA4, it will capture that. So you'll see increased numbers of sessions based on that, especially around mobile users, but also on desktop. Because for the first time ever, you can have a session that didn't start with a page view. A few other differences are attribution modeling. So everything in Universal was last click. And within GA, you could look at conversions based on different attribution models. But in GA4, you can actually switch between those attribution models. But it is defaulting to a data-driven attribution model, which is giving credit to multiple touch points based on how the users flow through that, and with multiple visits, looking at the most popular paths and deciding how much credit those get. Another big change is finding some of the dimensions and metrics we're used to seeing in there. It's not all automatically in there. Bounce rate has disappeared and it's become engaged user, which is actually a much better way of looking at how user behavior is functioning on your site. And there are dimensions missing. So if you're using paid ads, you're using UTM content and term, which are those parameters that tell you the keyword and ad copy. And those are not automatically available in GA4. You have to set those up with custom dimensions to be able to see those. So lots of differences in various states. That's only the highlights of some of the differences there are.
Awesome.
I think one of the
Go ahead, Trey.
I think one of the things to note while we kind of examine some of these differences and kind of incompatibilities right, this is where we're really going to see the advantage of having, BigQuery or another, database, is the opportunity to get in and take our universal analytics data and our GA4 data and model them so that we can get, more than just a 13-month look back once this GA4 rollout is kind of finalized and they actually do sunset universal.
Awesome. And a big component of this is that, as privacy policies and processes have really come into a big player on the stage, that's been baked in, and GA4 is built around that. So there's a lot of things that are already being held safe in terms of a privacy policy. So tell me more about some of these privacy settings and things that we can expect to be covered within GA4.
Yeah, privacy is definitely a hot topic of conversation today in the marketing space. New regulations continue to roll out. And so that really is a core feature of GA4. And really it's offering some tighter integrations with consent tools that are available today. There's some select tools that GA4 works with pretty natively. So those cookie consent pop-ups that you see on websites that say, do you want to be tracked? Much better integration with that. And then it's configurable. So there's a lot of adjustments you can make to make sure that the privacy settings within GA4 align with your organization's stance on privacy as well. Another important update, GA4 does not store IP addresses. That's personally identifiable information, and a lot of that can be used to kind of figure out your location, and a lot of detail about you. So with this, GA4 is not storing IP addresses. A big component is the reliance on first-party cookies. So first-party cookies make GA4 compliant with the new privacy laws like GDPR and CCPA. So third-party cookies, you probably heard a lot about. I know we've talked about them before too. Are the ones that let companies track, behavior across sites and sort of stitch together that data to really build profiles, of users. And that's where a lot of questions about privacy come into play. And so, that's what is setting GA4 apart here, is that it's first-party cookies, which is compliant with regulations for GDPR, CCPA, and removes some of that sort of questionable use of third-party data. And in that vein, it's future-proof to a sense, right? So it's looking ahead at this cookie-less future. So right now it's first-party cookie dependent, but if you did go without that first-party cookie component, it can use machine learning and data modeling to help fill in some data gaps. So you still get that robust understanding of user behavior, but it's definitely more privacy compliant.
Awesome. So the biggest thing for me in learning more about this from our panel is that you need a plan and you need it soon. So when we talk about that this is rolling out in July 2023, as Trey already said, if you want that 13-month look back, you want a year's worth of data within GA4, you need to be set up by July 2022 to get that year of usable data. Guys, talk to me about what a plan looks like, how quickly people need to move in order to get this set up.
Yeah, I mean, it's right around the corner. I think there's an easy way to kind of say, hey, we've got a year before the data, before I really have to worry about this. It doesn't go live till July 2023. But the reality is you need to start now, right, Kim?
Right. You definitely want to develop a plan and start training up. There's a lot of changes, as we mentioned, in GA4. So really getting familiar with the system is going to be important.
Got it. Also, how people think about these KPIs, like what matters, how they need to track it, because there are some things that are different there. And so as Kim said, training up and kind of getting ahead of that learning curve will really benefit in making sure that the things that matter still matter and are represented in your visualizations. So with the changes, right, like moving from Universal Analytics to GA4, there's a lot of different comparisons. So we've kind of broken out some of the main ones to talk you through. The first is actually the user interface. So when you log in and go into GA4, there's a lot of change up, a facelift, if you will, that's been provided to this. Tell me a little bit more about some of what this visualization change looks like.
Yeah, I know Kim has a great ABCs of the reporting suite, and she'll talk about that too. But for me as an analyst, I think the analysis section here is really useful and a departure from previous iterations of Google Analytics, right? So now you have built-in tools like cohort analysis. It's pretty simple to run. User Explorer lets you get, again, deeper insights into user, which is, again, the core. And I know Kim has some highlights here too.
Yep. For a long time, we've been used to the ABCs of analytics. So it was audience acquisition, behavior, and conversions. And, that has completely changed. We've broken it up into life cycle and user. But one of the great things about GA4 is you can actually customize the side nav and add items that you frequently report on. So that's a cool new feature instead of having to dig in there and get to your data. As Tracy mentioned, there's the Explore report, and that's a way to deep dive into all of your data. And that was something that used to only be able to be used in Analytics 360. So some really cool new features. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to find where things are.
For sure.
Yeah, I didn't know you could save them though. That's really useful to know.
The bigger thing here is the data model comparison. So how data was originally pulled in and rendered within Universal Analytics. Big change up to what the data model is that runs GA4. So tell me a little bit about what that change up looks like, what data is going to be important.
Yeah, I think there are, really significant changes, obviously kind of within the reporting interface and the functionalities, to serve the analytics teams. We also have really significant changes under the hood between, Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. So it's helpful to kind of remember all the way back to, 2005, right, where Urchin rolled out. Originally Universal or Google Analytics was meant to kind of, it was more of a website traffic tool, right? So the primary considerations were really, user devices and which pages they were on at what times. And from that, they kind of baked in sessions through these hits. As we move into GA4, we'll see that the data model is significantly different and really more indicative of these changes that we're seeing within the analytics space today, which is kind of away from these totals and summaries and more into the user experience and kind of the holistic website or the holistic user brand experience. And so really centering on users and our properties. And that's the reason for some of the changes that we'll see between, hits between Universal and Google Analytics 4 during this transition.
Got it. I love that it's user first and then property. I think that's a great change, but also as we talked through that timeline, right? They brought in web versus app. Now they're saying user first, let's find the people. And then also we're going to tell you what they're doing within each of the different properties or channels that you have. So
I think that's a really great call out.
Yeah.
Just simply because if you worked with Google Analytics over the past 10 years, you've probably come across a cross-domain tracking consideration, right? Where a brand maybe has multiple website, multiple properties, and it's one unified, digital experience, but tracking is made complicated by that. And so one of the linchpins of GA4 is to be able to actually roll all of those up into one stream. And to David's point, be able to see, how the user actually traverses our multiple properties and ultimately converts.
I love it. So a big piece of this will be the BigQuery, right? And so I'm sure a lot of our audience has heard of BigQuery, maybe not know what it does, but it's really going to be a large focus, both of the transition to GA4, but then ongoing analysis and reporting. So talk to me about BigQuery. What's the importance that it holds? What are some of the uses for it? How should I be prepared to engage with it?
Sure. So as we kind of mentioned earlier, the BigQuery integration in itself is going to be free with GA4, which means that we're able to kick out our raw data from our analytics platform into a place where we can query it and we can model it and we can, apply business rules to our data in effort to provide, data-driven insights to key stakeholders, more quickly. There is some significant differences, when we talk about, BigQuery versus like Data Studio reporting. Most namely in the amount of data that you're going to be querying and your ability to impart that logic to surface those relevant insights. And so Data Studio is a tool that can hook up natively to the platform. And in that way, you're still playing with the same data, but the functionalities will be very different. In BigQuery, it's really our opportunity to not only take our web analytics data, but any data from other platforms as well, and start to paint a more complete or more robust picture of how we're interacting with our customers. Additionally, because BigQuery exists kind of natively within the GCP space, it opens up a lot of opportunities that didn't really exist in either the standard universal analytics accounts, just because it was too difficult to get to. And so things like marketing automations and data modeling, audience building are now opportunities for organizations that might not have been able to get into a 360 instance previously. So BigQuery is a wonderful tool, and I will talk about it all day if you will let me, I promise. But there's a ton of resources out there, and there's a lot of training available. But one of the things to really understand is that, there is technical debt associated. And so it's always kind of this dance, right, of feeding the business as quickly as possible and ensuring that things like cloud cost monitoring, which we'll talk a little bit about later, are being, considered top of mind as well.
One question, Trey. For anybody using GA4, do they want to hook up to BigQuery right away, or is it something they can do down the line?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that. If you had a universal analytics like a 360 account, you could do a historical backfill. So back to the entirety of all the data that you've collected. In GA4, you get yesterday's data. And so if we believe BigQuery to be an opportunity future state, we should really turn it on as soon as we have our GA4 instance up and running. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked.
Awesome. And something to think about here is, because users are at the top of the pyramid or the top of the core, user identification, making sure it's accurate. There's some features that dedupe this. But when I first get in there, I might notice smaller numbers, and that'll probably scare me, looking at that. So with user identification, what can I expect in GA4 compared to what we've seen previously in the UA?
Yeah. We talked about the differences in sessions. So it's the same for users, except it's an improvement. So you'll see smaller numbers, but it's more representative of the people visiting your site. So, the first way Google identifies you is if a user logs into your site and has a user ID, you're sending that to GA4. That's your first line. That is a known person. And if they didn't log into your site, Google next moves to Google Signals. So that's Google knows everything about you. And if you're logged in, they know who you are and can recognize you as a person, whether you're on mobile or desktop. And if for some reason Google doesn't know who you are, then it moves to client ID. So that's the device identification. It's really a device browser combination. So I'd have two client IDs if I was on mobile and Safari versus desktop and Chrome. So another great thing about GA4 is we've all seen artificial counts of users and sessions, and that's spam traffic. So GA4 has added a line of defense. So spam traffic was technically sent through the measurement protocol in Universal Analytics because all GA property IDs were in numerical order. So it was pretty easy to just send tons of spam to property after property after property. And Google tried to keep up, but spammers are inventive and kept coming up with new ways. And so in GA4, you can lock down your measurement protocol and give it a secret API key. And that way, no spam traffic can be sent through that measurement protocol unless it has that secret API key.
I love it. I think that's one of my favorite features because we always see holiday periods or promotional traffic and it just explodes, but it's not that core audience, right? And so we go through and try to find who these ghosts are, and nothing shows up. And so that spam detection secrets API is one of my favorite things to hear about. So with those changes and the vast difference that we're going to see between the two, getting a plan together, preparing for this migration, properly understanding the tasks at hand, I would say, here's what we've mapped out about what needs to happen. And ideally within the next 32 days. But again, as a lot of people are starting to kind of wrap their hands around it and figure it out, maybe not all of these have to be done in the next 32 days, but I'll leave it to our panelists. Walk me through what a successful migration plan looks like and some of the timing associated with it.
Sure, David. You want to start with crafting a strategy. It's taking a step back, looking at your website. Every website has a purpose, and making sure you're going through your site and identifying those purposes, those MVPs to track. Just really getting an idea of how all of that is on your website and how that fits into GA's new way of tracking the events plus parameters. You can layer in more information, just really getting that overall picture of where you are, what you want to track, and how to measure your website's purpose.
Yeah, so next up, after we kind of plan the future, we really need to look at what we've done over the past, years, up to 17 years, right? We need to audit how we've been tracking. Most of our Google Analytics accounts, and there's no shame, have a ton of stuff that we don't necessarily need anymore. And so the opportunity is to go back, through all of our GA properties and the events and the custom dimensions and really whittle down to those metrics that matter, and things that we're also going to be able to recreate, within the GA4 space, right? So auditing and really understanding based on the website and, the brand's position today, what is different and what doesn't necessarily need to be carried over. The next, probably one of my favorites, just because at the end of the day, we do want to extract all of our universal analytics data. Understanding, of course, that you cannot take any universal data and put it into your GA4 account. That won't work. We need a different solution. So, would definitely recommend extracting all of your universal analytics data and storing it, because it's going to be, part and parcel to your ability to conduct, BI outside of a 13-month window, come July 2023.
And there are some rumors that Google's going to help with that and develop some tools that will help you extract your data. And once you've done all that legwork, you've crafted a strategy, you've audited, you've come up with a plan to get your historical data, then you're going to dive into the hard work of implementing all your data and tracking. So you use Tag Manager, you get tracking all your MVPs, and then there's a great new debug mode when you're implementing, whether you're previewing in Tag Manager or there's a Chrome GA debugger add-on you can use. It will show up in your analytics in the debug section, so you can see how that data is flowing in, and if everything looks right. And I highly suggest always testing.
Yes, please test your data.
Yeah.
So yeah, next up is updating your processes. This is really the culmination of all these steps before. This is where that rubber meets the road. So we talked about, you probably have some old KPIs, things that aren't really useful anymore. Those are probably reflected in your reports, and chances are you have a lot of automated reporting that's kicked off on a schedule to stakeholders throughout your organization. So this is the time to overhaul those, revamp, refresh, make sure that it's aligned with your strategy that you outlined in the beginning, and that data that you need to make accessible, whether it's to Data Studio or within the UI itself, make sure that that's available through configuration. Next up after that, you train your team, and I think this is really kind of an ongoing process, no matter the product or life cycle of it. There's a lot to learn here. It is a completely revamped tool, and it's going to take a lot of training and kind of working together to solve for unexpected cases and all that. So there are some resources. Google does not have any specific GA4 certifications yet, but there are some resources out there. They've pointed out some on Skillshare. They've also rolled out grow.google.com. So that has some career certifications, not specific to GA4, but one I think is really interesting on Coursera is also a data analytics course sponsored by Google, really diving into how to work with this data. So a lot of resources, and there's also online forums. But again, it's going to be a partnership, and I think we're all going to have to learn together as we go.
Got it. But guys, I'm a big organization. Like, this process would take months, and y'all are telling me I've got 32 days. So can I just go ahead and implement GA4 now? Like, can I just turn it on? What do I need to do? Because I don't want to miss out on any of this data.
Yeah. I would say yes. Something is always better than nothing. You can get the base GA4 up and running in no time. And you can even enable some of the enhanced measurements that track outbound links and scrolls and downloads. So you can get quite a bit with just putting the basics out there and really get the ball rolling.
Awesome. That allows me to get some of these other steps figured out through my multitude of meetings and work. So thank you for letting me know that. That's awesome insight.
I also think it's important to note, kind of within that BigQuery is obviously an opportunity to come back at a later date and reconstitute, some metrics or dimensions that might be tracked that we weren't able to get into the GA interface in time. So kind of along with that, BigQuery is going to help solve a lot of problems, but that could be one of them.
Agreed. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us so far. So we've covered kind of the, what is GA4, why Google is making the move to it, as well as some of the comparisons and things to expect and some of the wild differences that, we're going to see. Putting all of this into action, right? We've got some hot topics now that I'd like to walk the panel through, some questions and things that you're curious about. If you have your own questions, I see a few that are already coming in, go ahead and use the chat to post those. We have a Q&A section that we'll go through later and answer those. But first, let's dive into some hot topic. Let's talk about some things that brands face. First, with these changes, right, what do you think is the single most exciting gain for brands in moving to GA4?
Yeah, I think it's just that enhanced insight to the user and all the touch points that they're taking within that journey to transact with you. So you get a much clearer picture of the attribution and the device experiences that led to that final conversion.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, Tracy. I'll also add that with GA4, the integration of BigQuery as well as other tools or properties within our marketing ecosystem, we're seeing that Google Analytics specifically, is kind of turning this corner from a reporting mechanism, which is obviously incredibly valuable, used for analysis and insights, into more of a functional component of our marketing stack. So, the ability to start to lean into some CDP-like behaviors, or to create audiences or build out marketing automations, whereas previously that was basically impossible with the standard Google Analytics, I think is probably the most exciting part from my perspective.
I love it. So another thing is, with the new advanced reports on the way within GA4 that we kind of briefly talked about before, which new report use case do you think most marketers would benefit from exploring? What are some of the new reports that we'll see, or abilities that are, kind of exciting and beneficial to brands?
I think one of my favorites is the funnel reports. So Universal, they had flow reports and they were supposed to be funnels, and they kind of failed at that job. But the funnel reports in GA4 actually work the way they're supposed to, and you can start identifying all your steps in the funnel, and you can look at them forwards and backwards and really understand that customer journey through your website. And I think that's one of my favorite ones, because it leads to such actionable data. You can see where customers might be running into problems and opportunities to fix things and improve that flow. So I think it's one of my favorite features of GA4.
As somebody who has hard-coded many pass-through and fallout funnels, this is one of my favorites too. Absolutely.
Yeah, it feels like something like this was so simple. Why was this missed for so long? So yeah, glad it's here.
I would say anytime your analysts are excited, smiling,
Yeah,
the engineers are, that's a great thing. And honestly, a report that a lot of clients, I think, and brands would find beneficial. But with this, right, there's this lot of information, a lot of changes, BigQuery, I didn't even know what that was. Like what's the biggest hurdle? What keeps you up at night? What concerns would you have about this migration?
I think one of the most challenging things has been the differences in the UI. So all of your data is available in BigQuery. You send it in there. And in Universal Analytics, I could track an event and there's my data. Now I track an event and there's some of my data because you need to do additional configuration to be able to see it within the UI or when you hook it up to Data Studio. So I think that's one of the big hurdles. Sending your data to GA isn't enough unless you're using BigQuery to see it in the UI and in Data Studio. There's extra configuration.
and there's some out of the box. Like I remember reading about events, Kim, and I think you can fill in a little bit more. But there's some out of the box events that are probably useful, but you can customize too. And so, what's the value of having the out of the box one set up, for example?
Yeah, the enhanced measurements, and I think we touched on them briefly earlier, they track downloads, outbound links, scroll depth, YouTube video engagement. So a lot of those frequently tracked items across websites, and you can just check a box and those will be tracked. And I think that's a useful feature because it lightens the load on implementation. And since these are such frequently used items, it's great to have those.
Nice. So this sounds like it's going to take a village. So how does this marketing team, analytics team, development team, how do we come together? If I'm scheduling this meeting, if I'm kicking this off, who do I involve in the conversation? Who do I invite into this meeting? And kind of what are the roles and people that I need to have?
Yeah, I love this picture. It's sort of like the knights of the analytics table, and analytics is for everyone now, right? So you're bringing in finance. There's definitely a component there. Some of these tools like BigQuery, are pretty scalable and can realize some cost in the long run, so you're going to want finance involved. Marketing is always going to decide KPIs, what they're trying to affect with marketing campaigns, understanding user behavior. So marketing definitely needs to be in the room, as always. I think analysts are important. They're going to be that intermediary translating what marketing wants to have happen to the engineering team, who are going to be vital in this whole process. I think GA4 really brings an opportunity for data maturation. So sort of taking that step into really integrating digital behavior into your full BI understanding, as Trey sort of alluded to before. And so, I think the earlier on you get everybody in a room to talk about what this means, how we're going to leverage it, what's important to us in terms of understanding and insight, I think the better off your implementation will fare. And really, honestly, the better data and insight you'll get in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out. Traditionally, marketing analytics and Google Analytics has predominantly been that, right? Has kind of fallen under the umbrella of the marketing department. But with these changes, and a lot of them are, kind of at the crux of the data privacy conversation, our next iteration of analytics to implementation is going to be more of an organizational feat. Right. So to Tracy's point, it's going to involve marketing. It's going to involve, strategy and the analysis team, the engineering team, the IT department, and finance. And I would understand if anybody who is listening today is getting a little bit cagey because we've mentioned finance like 3 times so far. But at the end of the day, Google is pay to play, and there is this balance between serving the needs of the business with immediacy and hedging against, cloud costs. But I'll also say that at the end of the day, good business intelligence begets itself. And so it's not necessarily a cost to hedge against. It's something we want to lean into and drive towards a more rich ROI. So, it's because of that we think it's so crucial to get all the key players at the table and around table all at the same time to discuss the opportunities and future state use cases, because we do want to build it to be leveraged.
Yeah, I would also say too, just one last note on that. I would say that it would make sense too to probably involve agency partners at sometimes too. There's key moments in the conversation that can help guide or make sure that their programs, marketing campaigns and all align with the end goal too. So that's a good opportunity to, again, get everybody in the room.
Agreed. So let's wrap it up. Let's provide some summary. Let's get into some Q&A. Here's what we talked about today. Universal Analytics is sunsetting in July 2023. Not an update, new way of analysis. Old data will become incompatible. Data privacy, as the panelists talked about, is at its core, but you need a plan and you need it soon. There's a lot of exciting and new features coming out. Updated reports, event-based measurement, automated event tracking, cross-device and cross-platform, right? Engagement metrics, but BigQuery connection, which is great that it's being included in this, and also allowing us to keep our old data and do measurement across the new data that we'll be gathering in GA4. But with that, there's 5 key takeaways that are really important. This has to be a priority. This is not a roadmap item. You can't wait on it. You need to get set up, especially if you want a year's worth of comparable data. So the clock has already started ticking. 32 days, business days until July 1st. So set up your instance now. Get your team wrapped around what BigQuery is going to play as a part in this, what they need to be using it for, and make sure that there's a plan around that usage. Understand your KPIs that matter, tracking and analyzing your useful data. So there are differences, as we talked about, between UA and GA4. So making sure that you understand what your KPIs are and how you need to gather that data. But honestly, as the panelists talked about, this is a good thing for customers and brands. A lot of the ways that we're now going to be looking at our customers and retaining and actioning off their data is really awesome. There's a lot of insightful analysis that's been built around this, a lot of great reporting and things that we'll be able to see and understand now about our customers. So first, let me thank everyone for joining us today. We have some questions that have been asked. If you have any other questions, now's the time to get those in. And I will leave up. If you do have questions but can't stay, go ahead and follow up with us. Here's all of our contact information. So please reach out to us. If you're not already working with an agency partner, of course, we'd love to help and help you understand this if you're already working with us or just need some insights. Feel free to reach out. The team is always here to support, and our agency is built around, meeting clients at their point of need. So let us provide to you that better client experience and helping you adjust and migrate to GA4. So some questions that have come up, guys. So we're going to go a little bit back and forth of some of the topicality today. Our first question comes from Lauren. Once 2023 rolls around, how will we compare data to anything prior to that changeover?
The important part of that is going to be that export of your universal data before it disappears. And like we talked about, there are going to be differences between your universal data and your GA4 data. So it won't necessarily be an apples to apples comparison, but you will have some type of comparison. So really finding a way to export the metrics that matter from universal analytics will be the route to go.
Trey,
yeah, I think
go ahead.
I was going to say a really quick kind of example would be, users, and let's say we have a form submission and we pass a unique ID with that form, right? Those are going to be opportunities to have that comparison with our universal analytics, whereas things like sessions or page views or things of that nature might not be. So to Kim's point, the metrics that matter, we should be able to associate. There might need to be an asterisk or two, dependent upon, you know, how the data shakes out. But, you know, we will be able to look back into the universal, you know, time frame and get a better understanding of where we are today.
Yeah,
I think
if you
too.
stored it. I like that Kim said disappear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Call out. Disappeared
Yeah.
is scary. Tracy,
Yeah.
what do you have to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think too, this is again why we're sort of pushing for this July 22. I believe you said it's a 32-day countdown, which is also alarming. But that's why we're kind of pushing for that July 22 rollout, because then you'll have a full year-over-year comparison, right, of GA4 to GA4. So that'll just help smooth that out if you can make it happen.
Awesome. Another question that came in while we were talking is from Austin. They ask, if we set it up now, will we have two separate GA accounts, or will there be a toggle to go between within the account?
So when you set up a GA4 instance, it's another property within your accounts because it tracks completely differently. It's not just adding on to your universal account. It becomes a separate property. And you will be able to, you know, go back and forth between your universal as long as you're collecting data into your GA4 property. So both sets of data will be there. And, you know, the recommendation is still, you know, continue to collect your universal data and just add GA4 to it.
Anything else anyone would add? Sounded like a pretty straightforward answer on that one. Yeah, sweet. Another question we received from Lauren, you know, what if I don't change over until September? Does this mean I won't have year-over-year data for July and August? Any other cons to delaying turning on GA4?
I would say if you're Analytics 360, you'll have a little time and until October. But if you're on the free version of GA, you know, it really comes down to that year-over-year data. I think, you know, the recommendation should be to at least get that base GA4 tracking on, even if you haven't layered in all the events and those, you know, KPIs, because that should be a fairly simple rollout on those, and then you have something.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, you know, rolling into a gap with your data. I think, you know, prioritizing and creating time for it today is probably going to be a struggle for everybody. But, you know, try to put yourself a year into the future and imagine yourself without the data. That's going to be a little bit crunchier for everybody. So would definitely recommend prioritizing it now.
Got it. Another question from Lauren. I have two people on my team and we tag team reporting and setup in GA. Could this be a project to set it up and get us trained so that we can keep this running?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say, you know, that's what we're here for. And, you know, we're here to kind of be an extension and support, you know, and kind of guide along the way. It's a massive undertaking, you know, or it can be. So I think absolutely we could set up training and work with you, partner with you to make sure that you're, you know, developing a cohesive strategy and, you know, your implementation follows that strategy.
Yeah, and I think with some of the components, right, when we talk about training, BigQuery is probably a big training opportunity for a lot of people, as well as GA4 is going to be a training opportunity for everyone because there are a lot of noticeable differences. Give me the priorities of training. Where would you start? Like who needs to learn more sooner?
That's a good question. I know all of us were like, we need to learn more now.
I think everybody's going to feel like they need to get in, you know, first.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, I think they're probably all, you know, right. It's definitely, you know, I think at the end of the day, the use of GA and maybe Data Studio and the use of BigQuery, which exists inside of the cloud, that has a lot of other focused tools to build out a near real-time, well-fitted analytics architecture. They're going to be different teams at the end of the day. And so I think coordination between engineering and IT, as well as analytics and marketing, is going to be crucial during this time to make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. But at the end of the day, they're going to be training up on different aspects of the product.
Got it. And as we get to the end of this, one question, one curiosity, why is Google sunsetting Universal Analytics after they've supported it for so long? We went through that timeline way back when. Urchin tags still work, right? Now all of a sudden there's this big change. Why? What finally caused this?
There are some theories out there. Oh, go ahead, Trey.
Oh, no, after you.
There are theories out there. A lot of it is around privacy. We know Universal Analytics did not meet privacy regulations because they were tracking users' IP address, even though we couldn't see that on the GA side. Google had it on their side. Also, there's the push towards monetization of GA. Once you allow people to hook up BigQuery for free, which is great, but there are costs to query and BigQuery. So it gives Google an opportunity to monetize GA outside of 360.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different aspects included. I think data and privacy, to your point, is one of the larger considerations. The data and privacy conversation is largely due in part to some of Google's behaviors and our behaviors through Google over the past 10 years. And so, GA4 is meant to meet all of those privacy regulations. And I'm sure you're even still reading about, rulings that are occurring over in the EU. And so that conversation is not done, but GA4 is meant to satisfy some of those requirements. And then also, kind of as we mentioned earlier, become a more functional component within our marketing stack. So being able to connect to other properties, being able to send the right signals directly to other properties so that we can do things like marketing automations or audience building. As somewhat of a replacement for some of what was viewed as an encroachment of user privacy under Universal Analytics.
For sure. And I also think there's the reason Google's getting rid of Universal altogether and all that data will go away is twofold. One, the privacy and also the technical debt on Google's side. They spend a lot of power storing that data, processing that data. I know we all get a little frustrated if we're in the Universal interface and it's a little slow and laggy. So they're doing away with all of that. And I think GA4 is a little more streamlined, still a little slow in places. But
Awesome.
I
So we're wrapping up here. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'm sure you heard the passion of our panelists, and again, as this is a near and dear subject, but also something scary to think about. It's great to have the conversation and to understand more about GA4. So a big thank you to our panelists that joined us, Trey Williams, Kim Town, and Tracy Gamlin. If you do have any follow-up questions, please reach out to us either at hello@tandemtheory.com or at any of our individual emails that have been shared here. We look forward to any and all questions that you may have. As a follow-up, you will receive an email after this that will allow you to see the deck so that if you have to go back and check out some of the information that will be provided to you. Again, thank everyone for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.